German POWs were shocked by America's industrial might after arriving in the United States. The real story. When the German soldiers were captured on the battlefields of North Africa, Italy, and later France, many of them expected harsh treatment, ruined cities, and perhaps even starvation at the hands of their enemies. Instead, what awaited them was something they couldn't have imagined: a prosperous, modern, and industrially unstoppable America that left them stunned. Captured in the thousands, by 1943, as the Allies began defeating German forces in North Africa, thousands of German soldiers, veterans of the Afrika Korps under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, surrendered. These men, proud and disciplined, had been told that America was chaotic, poor, racially divided, and weak, a place incapable of serious warfare. But the Allies had a problem: too many POWs. Keeping them in North Africa or Britain was logistically impossible. So the United States offered a bold solution: ship them across the Atlantic. By the end of the war, over 425,000 German prisoners of war were housed in more than 700 camps across the United States, from California to Texas, from Louisiana to Michigan.
The first shock: a peaceful, prosperous America. When the first groups of German POWs arrived in U.S. ports, usually New York, Boston, or Norfolk, their first reaction was disbelief. There were no bombed-out cities, no shortages, and no chaos. The streets were full of cars, the stores full of goods, and factories ran day and night. They couldn't believe their eyes. The propaganda they'd been fed by the Nazis, that America was weak, divided, and collapsing, was utterly false. One POW later recalled, "When we saw how well Americans lived, how big their factories were, how much food and material there was everywhere, we knew the war was lost." Camps that felt like small towns. Once processed, the prisoners were sent to POW camps spread across the country. These weren't prisons of horror. They were often built near rural areas or military bases. The camps were run according to Geneva Convention rules: fair treatment, sufficient food, and even recreation. The prisoners built their own facilities, planted gardens, played soccer, made music, and even published camp newspapers. Many camps had classrooms where POWs could study English, mathematics, and American history. Some even watched movies and listened to American radio broadcasts.
The second shock: the abundance of everything. Inside the camps, the Germans were fed better than most Europeans, and sometimes even better than American civilians on wartime rations. They were astonished at the endless supply of food, especially meat, coffee, bread, and fruit. A German officer once wrote home through censored channels, "The Americans eat like kings. Even their prisoners eat better than our soldiers at the front." Many of them, who had lived under the strict rationing of the Third Reich, couldn't comprehend the industrial scale of American production: steel, trucks, tanks, aircraft, and ships rolling off assembly lines faster than Germany could destroy them. Work programs from enemies to farmhands. The U.S. government allowed POWs to work, mostly in agriculture, forestry, and construction, in exchange for small wages. This solved a critical wartime problem: labor shortages caused by millions of American men being overseas. German POWs picked cotton in Texas, harvested corn in the Midwest, and helped rebuild rural towns. At first, local Americans were suspicious, but soon many realized the POWs were just young men like their own sons, caught up in war. They worked hard and often respectfully. Friendships began to form. In some areas, farmers invited POWs for meals on Sundays, and lasting bonds were formed. Many Germans were deeply moved by the kindness shown by people who had every reason to hate them.
The third shock:
Freedom and fairness. Perhaps the greatest surprise came from how fairly they were treated. The Nazi regime had painted the Allies as cruel monsters, yet in the U.S. they were given food, medical care, books, and even opportunities to learn. American guards treated them not with brutality but with professionalism, something that shattered years of Nazi propaganda. Many POWs said the defining moment of their transformation was seeing American democracy in action, how free citizens spoke openly, criticized leaders, and still worked together for victory. It was a vision of freedom most had never known. From enemies to admirers. As the months went by, a subtle change took place. The German prisoners began to respect and even admire the United States. They realized that America's strength wasn't just in its machines. It was in its unity, freedom, and industry. By 1945, when the war ended, thousands of German POWs were reluctant to leave. Some even applied to stay in the United States, though most were repatriated to Germany in 1946. Many later returned as immigrants, inspired by what they had seen.
A legacy of respect. Historians estimate that over 25% of German POWs in America went home with pro-American views. They told their families about a country that treated them with dignity, a land of vast factories, full supermarkets, and freedom of speech. It's said that the experience of captivity in the U.S. helped re-educate a generation of Germans, men who would later help rebuild a democratic West Germany. The final lesson. The experience of these German POWs revealed one of America's greatest weapons in WWII. Not a bomb, not a tank, but its industrial and moral strength. The factories of Detroit, the shipyards of California, the oil fields of Texas, and the open-heartedness of ordinary Americans together formed a power that no dictatorship could match. For the German soldiers who saw it firsthand, it was a revelation they would never forget. They came as enemies and left as witnesses to a superpower born not only from steel, but from freedom itself.
Would never forget. They came as enemies.
For the German soldiers who saw it firsthand, it was a revelation they would never forget.